Social media companies decided to do a coordinated purge of various accounts. And I use that word because all of this stuff that I'm about to tell you happened at the same time. It happened on the same day. So first, let's go to USA Today, and they say, Twitch suspended the official Donald Trump channel for violating rules against hate speech. So they explain that the reason why it was suspended, now I do think suspended is different from being banned. In other words, it's temporarily down, but it'll come back up. I don't know how long the time frame is that they're going to keep it down, but they say it was because of a rebroadcast of his 2015 campaign launch speech. Now, I don't know how many of you remember that, but what he said in that speech, one of the things he said in that speech was, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crimes, they're criminals, they're rapists. I assume some are good people. And he was talking about Mexicans coming into the country, or people coming through the Mexican border into the country. So people said that's hate speech against Mexicans. That's hate speech, and it's ban-worthy. And so they did a temporary suspension. What he says is newsworthy by definition because he's the president. So if you ban him on Twitch, if you ban him on Twitter, if you ban him on Facebook, okay, then he says something and ABC News and CBS and CNN and Fox News report it. Are they going to put a ban on reporting on what the president says? And by the way, you're also just handing over to them a monopoly on news and information, which is what they want. And so if you could try to sanitize the world, but somebody's going to report on what the frickin' president is saying. Duh. Somebody's going to do that. Then we go on to YouTube. YouTube banned 6 far-right channels. The removed accounts include those owned by far-right political entertainer Stefan Molyneux, white nationalist outlets American Renaissance and Radix Journal, as well as longtime Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke. YouTube also removed 2 associated channels, one belonging to alt-right poster boy Richard Spencer and another hosting American Renaissance podcasts. Quote, we have strict policies prohibiting hate speech on YouTube and terminate any channels that repeatedly or egregiously violate those policies. After updating our guidelines to better address supremacist content, we saw a 5-time spike in video removals and have terminated over 25,000 channels for violating our hate speech policies, a YouTube spokesperson told Right Wing Watch in an email. All right, we open the door. We're going down this path. You need to understand it's not going to stop here. So as soon as you start banning, deplatforming, nitpicking, filtering who's okay and who's not okay, what happens is there is a massive, colossal, gargantuan gray area. Some things everybody looks at and goes, oh my God, that's so extreme. Everybody kind of understands it and gets it. If there's a channel that is outright pushing Nazism, I think most people would look at that and go, I get it. But listen, then you go to a guy like Stefan Molyneux, and I'm no fan of the guy, believe me. And I think that he is, I've covered some of his stuff when he had moments of like complete bigotry or white nationalist apologetics. He did this whole documentary on Poland, and he was like, see, it's very white and everything here is good. So he's not a good guy, don't get it twisted. But the overwhelming majority of the stuff on his channel is not really race-related. And he used to be like this hardcore libertarian guy. And then he kind of became more of a paleo-conservative with the Trump era and hopped on the Trump bandwagon. And his ideas became more in line with Trump. Like, he used to advocate for totally open borders because he was a strict anarcho-capitalist libertarian. And then he went, where's the wind blowing here? Oh, it's going in the other direction? Okay, now I'm like Donald Trump, but I'm like a paleo-conservative and I want to shut down the borders. But, he had thousands of videos on his channel. Thousands of them. And the idea that every single one of those videos is problematic, is white nationalist stuff, is unacceptable. That's just not true. I mean, there were instances of him just debating the tax code with people. There are instances of him debating free will versus determinism. Again, this is not a defense. I don't like Stefan Molyneux as a person, and I don't agree with his political opinions at all. But to try to say that he is like equal to Richard Spencer, that's just not true. I mean, that's just factually wrong. He's not as bad as Richard Spencer is, period. He's just not. So, see, this is what I mean. As soon as you allow banning, deplatforming, well, now that door's open. Now the discussion is, who do you ban and deplatform? And there is no way to walk that line effectively and correctly. Because I got news for everybody out there. So you went after a bunch of far-right channels. Okay. You know what happens next, right? What happens next is people go, the right cries bloody murder, and they go, you took down all these channels. What about the far left channels that are also preaching hate, that also are problematic, that also have issues? So what's next? I don't know. They'll probably take some far left black nationalist type channel. Now, you guys might be scoffing and saying, no, there's no such thing. There is such a thing as black nationalism, and I have heard some curious arguments from that philosophy, from that ideological perspective. So you just wait. There'll be some Black Lives Matter channel that gets pulled down. Maybe they have, some video of the famous incident years ago where they were talking about cops and they said pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. Maybe they'll take down some communist stuff. It's easy to wrap your mind around that. Some tanky stuff. Stalin apologetics. These things seem extreme, but they exist. They definitely exist. There's this guy who's this hardcore Maoist, I think, and Jason Unruh or something like that. I saw his channel like 3 years ago or something like that, and I was kind of amazed that like that still is around. But I guess I shouldn't be, in the same way that am I surprised that they're still far right white nationalists? No, like obviously that's a thing that exists. There are also Maoists exist. So, but anyway, once you say, all right, let's ban, well, far right channels are getting banned here. But then, of course, the far right's going to scream bloody murder, and the right's going to scream bloody murder, and then they're going to go after the left, and they're going to find examples where they can pull them down on the left. Guys, Jimmy Dore was smeared in CNN as a conspiracy theorist, and it was linked with, like, Alex Jones and, a bunch of stuff. Why would they not come after 9/11 conspiracy videos? Why would they not come after those? Because they're going to say, hey, that's extreme. That's outside of the realm of polite society. You shouldn't be debating that. A lot of people died, and you're blaming the U.S. government. This is a conspiracy theory. This is not acceptable, and we're going to pull down all the 9/11 conspiracy theory stuff. Again, once you open that door to censorship and deplatforming, there's no shutting it. There's no such thing as just a little bit of censorship, just a little bit of deplatforming. What happens is it is nonstop. Now, some of you might listen to my commentary now and say, Kyle, I don't agree with you because I think they're only going to limit it to the far right, and they're only going to go after the people who are clearly problematic. Well, I can disprove you in real time. So Reddit has banned the subreddit The Donald and Chapo Trap House among 2,000 online communities in huge purge. It joined social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, reckoning with hate speech and misinformation. This literally case in point of what I just told you. So they ban the far-right sites. Some of them are really far-right. I don't want to downplay that. They ban them, and then they go, well, we obviously got to go after the far-left now, too, because it's only fair. And so they say, oh, the Donald, this subreddit's out of control. Well, so are the Chapo Trap House people. Now, I don't know, I'm sure most of my audience knows who Chapo Trap House is, but those guys are awesome, and they're hilarious. And their audience is largely the same. But, see, they need to play the game of the false equivalent. Oh, my God, the far right's bad, but also the far left is bad, and they're roughly equal, so just ban them both. This is what happens when you embrace censorship. This is what happens when you embrace, this kind of ideology, when you embrace deplatforming. Guys, I'm on that list. I don't know how far down you got to go to find me on that list, but I'm on that list of, it's somewhat problematic. We already know, I know as a matter of fact, that YouTube deprioritizes my show in the algorithm along with many other independent left-wing shows. I know that as a matter of fact. Why? Well, The Hill, for example. Now, I love the show. I'm not besmirching them in any way, shape, or form. But The Hill, we got lucky in that The Hill with Rising with Crystal and Sagar, The Hill is a corporation, and that's the parent company that has the show for their channel. So they get prioritized by the algorithm. Look at the rapid growth of that channel. Now, that's not to say downplay the work they do. I mean, they do a good job. But my point is, when the algorithm favors you, you grow at that pace. If the algorithm favored secular talk, we would grow at that pace. I started with a giant, 700,000 subscriber lead on Rising. They're going to pass me at some point. Now, are they just that much better than me? No, it's that the algorithm prioritizes them. So I know that my show is deprioritized by the algorithm as well as many other independent left-wing shows. So obviously I'm not in the total whitelisted category where, totally authoritative and acceptable source. No, I'm obviously deprioritized in one sense. So how do I know I'm going to escape a ban when you already started banning and deplatforming? All it takes is some right-wing hacks to dig up some old video of me saying the United States is the world's biggest terrorist, and boom, we're off to the races. You think things I say are not controversial because you agree with them. But to a Ted Cruz viewer or a Steven Crowder viewer, they look at me like I'm Satan reincarnate. So no matter how common sense you think your positions are, you're always pissing off somebody. You're always offending somebody, which is why you should not open the door to deplatforming and censorship. Because they will always come for you. They will always come for you. I think everything I say is true. I think everything I say is common sense. But there's plenty of people who disagree, and there's plenty of people who would say, Kyle, look at his hate speech against the 1%. Look at his hate speech against billionaires and corporations. Look at his hate speech against the military-industrial complex. Look at his hate speech against the U.S. military. And again, you think, the left, their hands are clean. Look at some of the talking points and commentary against police. Look at it. You don't think they're going to flip that and use it on you in the same kind of way that stuff is being used against the right now? Of course they are. Of course they are. Of course they are. It's just amazing to me that people don't realize that if you're cheering this on, it's so short-sighted. It is going to come for you 100%. 100%. So, under what rationale are they using to make this move? Well, in the case of Reddit, here are the new rules. Reddit introduced 8 rules on Monday that users and communities must follow to remain on the site, which now explicitly ban targeted harassment. We're going to go through these one by one so everybody can get a sense of how many of these make sense and how many don't. Targeted harassment, revealing other people's personal information. So that's doxing. I totally get banning that. Posting sexually explicit media of someone without their consent. I totally get banning that. Posting any sexual or suggestive content involving minors. Well, of course, that's pedophilia and that's got to go. Selling any illegal substances and more. So all those so far, hey, we're totally fine. But rule number 1 on Reddit's updated content policy is remember the human, barring users from, quote, attacking marginalized or vulnerable groups of people and noting that, quote, everyone has a right to use Reddit free of harassment, bullying, and threats of violence. Now, yes, direct threats of violence, that's even with our First Amendment and our absolutism on free speech in this country, it is illegal to do direct threats of violence. So everybody gets that. But people have a right to use Reddit free of harassment and bullying. But hold on. How the hell can we objectively define that? We can objectively define direct threats of violence. It's clear. Hey, did somebody make a direct threat of violence? You could easily tell that right away. free of harassment and bullying? One person's ribbing is another person's bullying and harassment. One person's joke is another person's bullying and harassment. There's no objective standard by which we can determine what harassing and bullying is. There's no objective standard where we could determine attacking a marginalized or vulnerable group of people. I mean, again, they say, oh, now we're going after hate speech on all these platforms. How the hell do you define that? How the hell do you define hate speech? Is it hate speech when I rail against Wall Street? Is it hate speech when I rail against billionaires? Is it hate speech when I rail against the U.S. military and the military-industrial complex? Is it hate speech when I rail against our politicians? Is that hate speech? Because I do hate them. I do hate our politicians. I do hate Wall Street. I do hate the military-industrial complex. I do hate the billionaires. I do hate the 1%. I hate them. I hate them. Where do you draw the line? There is no way to do it and get out of this unscathed, which is why, again, if you're cheering this on, it's so short-sighted. Guys, Facebook, I believe, had already done this, and I talked about it one of the first or second time I was on Rogan's podcast. They pulled down a bunch of pages that they're questionable in terms of where their funding came from or whatever. One of them was Cop Watch. It just highlighted when cops broke the law and did police brutality. Once you start censoring and deplatforming, of course they're going to take down stuff like Cop Watch. Of course they're going to go after every communist channel, every fringe Black Lives Matter channel. The left is going to be targeted just as much as the right. Any anti-establishment left voices. Every step of the way, the left pushed back against the Iraq war BS. We would have been banned under this climate back in 2003 when they were doing the build-up to war. If I came out here and said, Colin Powell is lying, Saddam does not have weapons of mass destruction, and he does not work with Al-Qaeda, they would have said, that's fake news. You got to pull him down or at the very least deprioritize him in the algorithm. Russiagate, every step of the way, we were right on Russiagate. Mainstream media was wrong. Are there consequences for mainstream media? No. They would have deprioritized us. They would have tried to censor us. When it came to the 2016 election, we were reporting on the WikiLeaks stuff, which found that the primary was rigged in favor of Hillary and against Bernie. When you report on that, mainstream media calls you a conspiracy theorist. Mainstream media tells you you're wrong and you're pushing out fake news. But under this logic, they ban that stuff. Or at the very least, deprioritize it. So we've opened the door now. And don't you dare say, no, it'll just only be the bad people. I just told you, Chapo Trap House was banned along with the Donald. How do you not see it? It's right in front of your eyes. So it really sickens me when I see left-wingers defending. Now we have corporations are the ultimate arbiter of truth and justice and free speech. You guys have been begging Mark Zuckerberg and Jack from Twitter and the board at Reddit and the Twitch people, you've been begging them to filter and censor and deplatform and determine what's okay and what's not okay. Why the hell would you trust a bunch of Silicon Valley billionaires to determine what makes sense and what doesn't make sense? By the way, another left-wing group they'll come after, pro-Palestinian voices. How? They'll just smear them all as being anti-Semitic. Pull them down. They're all anti-Semites. This is what's going to happen, people. It's the people with the money and the power who are going to determine what's okay and what's not okay. It's a typical strategy to pick out. At first, you go to the fringe voices that everybody agrees are terrible people and are so extreme. You ban them, like what happened with Alex Jones. It was never about Alex Jones. It was about, can we get rid of him? And let's see what the pushback is like. Oh, we were able to get rid of him. Well, let's get rid of a couple more. Let's get rid of a couple more. And away we go until there's only authoritative voices left. They originally picked somebody who we all agree is terrible so that they make everybody accept the principle of what they just did, namely the principle of censorship. And now we're off to the races. And there's no going back. Anybody who cheered this on is so short-sighted and so stupid. So stupid. In my opinion, I think we need the same kind of free speech protections in the digital realm as we have when it comes to the Constitution of the United States of America. So namely, every big social media company should be regulated like it's a public utility, and free speech protection should apply. That's the only way out of this as far as I see. You have to regulate all big social media companies as a public utility. You have to say these are the new town square, and so free speech is protected. That doesn't mean you could do libel. That doesn't mean you could do slander. That doesn't mean you could do direct threats of violence or doxing. All that stuff still won't be allowed. But fringe political opinions, they're definitely going to be allowed. They're definitely going to be allowed. Because who the hell is going to be the philosopher king who determines what's acceptable and what's not acceptable? It always comes back to personal taste on that front. That's what we need. We need the First Amendment online. And unfortunately, everybody who's in power and the majority of people are begging more censorship, more deplatforming, more filtering, because they're just such terrible people out there who have too much power and sway, so we got to do something. Well, careful what you wish for. You just gave Silicon Valley billionaires a hell of a lot more power, and you're not going to agree with all the decisions that they make. So we're in that Orwellian 1984 style scary world. It's already here.